The wood of the table had a scar, a shallow crescent near the left edge, probably carved by a ring or a key or someone's nervous fingernail during a different hearing on a different day. I found it while I was waiting. I traced it twice with my thumb, not to calm myself, but because my hands needed something to do that wasn't folding or clenching. The courtroom was the kind of room designed to make you feel small. High ceilings, bad acoustics, a flag that had never known wind. Fluorescent lights hummed at a frequency that sat just beneath the skin. I had been in rooms like this before, never as the accused. But the geometry of power is the same whether you're standing or sitting. The bench is higher, the robe is blacker, the gavel is heavier. Judge Harlan Thorpe entered at 9:03. He was a man built of jowls and impatience. His robe swallowed him, the way a curtain swallows a drafty window. Too much fabric, too little substance underneath. He did not look at me when he sat. He shuffled papers. He cleared his throat twice. He performed the ritual of busyness that judges perform to remind everyone that their time is more valuable than yours. My sister-in-law, Diane, sat 3 rows behind me on the left. I could feel her without looking. She had that talent, the ability to make her presence a kind of low-grade pressure on the back of your neck. She had married my younger brother 12 years ago, and she had resented me for roughly 11 of them. Not because I had done anything to her, because I had done nothing to her. I had not celebrated her. I had not attended her birthday parties. I had not fawned over her children. In her arithmetic, silence was an insult. And she had been waiting for a court to validate that arithmetic. The complaint was flimsy. Everyone in the room knew it. A former subordinate had alleged misconduct during a joint training exercise in the Baltic. The details were vague, the timeline inconsistent, and the witness list suspiciously thin. But the complaint had landed on the desk of a congressman who needed a distraction, and the congressman had called the judge. And the judge had called this hearing, and here I was, a medal on my chest, a target on my back. The judge spoke. His voice was gravel and performance. The petitioner has raised serious concerns regarding the conduct of Captain John Marshall. Concerns that, if substantiated, would reflect poorly not only on the captain but on the institution he represents. He paused. He wanted that to land. It did not land. I had heard worse in the rain in the dark with a man bleeding into my shoulder. Before we proceed, the judge continued, shuffling more paper. The court observes that Captain Marshall is wearing military decorations during these proceedings. This is, he tilted his head, searching for the word, inappropriate. The decorum of this court requires neutrality. These proceedings are civil in nature. The display of military honors constitutes an implicit appeal to authority that this court cannot permit. I looked at him. I did not speak. He cleared his throat again. Captain Marshall, you are hereby ordered to remove your Navy Cross. Immediately, the courtroom fell silent, not the respectful silence of attention, the hungry silence of an audience waiting for a man to break. I could hear the ventilation system rattling in the ceiling. I could hear someone's pen clicking. I could hear Diane's sharp, short exhale, the one she used when she had just received a gift she had not expected. She smirked. I did not see it, but I knew it. The particular geometry of her mouth when she believed she had won. She had come here to watch me bleed. She had expected tears or rage or a desperate plea. She had expected the medal to mean something to me in the way that a trophy means something to a collector. She did not understand what the medal was. She did not understand that it was not a trophy. It was a receipt. I unbuttoned my jacket. Slowly, not for effect. My fingers were old. They had been cold for years, ever since the Baltic. My joints remembered the dampness in a way my mind had learned to forget. I slid my hand beneath the lapel. The metal was cool against my palm. I had worn it so many times that the clasp had worn a permanent groove in the fabric. I unfastened it. I placed it on the table in front of me. The sound was small, a click of metal against wood. But in that silence it was a gunshot. The judge leaned forward, satisfied. His chin settled into the folds of his robe. He believed he had won. He believed he had demonstrated his dominance. He believed that the man before him was just another old soldier, stripped of his ornaments, reduced to a civilian. I said nothing. I waited, and then I remembered the photograph. It was in my desk drawer at home. I had looked at it that morning before leaving. A black and white image, cracked at the corners, of a man named Petty Officer Daniel Reyes. I did not know his first name before that day. I did not know anything about him except his blood type and his mother's phone number, which I had memorized for the evacuation form. He had been 22. He had been shot in the thigh and the abdomen during a chaotic extraction that had gone wrong in ways that no after-action report could capture. The helicopter had been overloaded. The pilot had been shouting. The enemy fire had been coming from 3 directions, and Reyes had looked at me with eyes that were not afraid, but simply tired, as if he had already accepted the mathematics of the situation. I had carried him. 210 pounds of bone, muscle, and dying hope. I had carried him through mud that sucked at my boots. I had carried him while my own side burned and bled. I had carried him for 400 meters that felt like 40 miles. And when we reached the extraction point, when the medic cut his pants open and started packing the wound, Reyes had reached up and grabbed my wrist. He had not said thank you. He had not said goodbye. He had simply squeezed once. Then he had let go. I never saw him again. He survived. I checked the records years later. He was a civilian now. He managed a hardware store in Ohio. He had a wife and 2 daughters. He had no idea that the medal pinned to my chest had his name on it in the way that really mattered. The medal was not mine. It was his. I had only held it in trust. The judge was still speaking. Something about the next witness. Something about the schedule. The court reporter was typing. Diane was leaning back in her chair, arms crossed, satisfied with her front row seat to my dismantling. I raised my hand, not high, just above the table. A gesture of recognition, not defiance. The judge stopped. He blinked. "Captain, Your Honor," I said. My voice was quiet. It had been quiet for decades. I had shouted once, in the Baltic, and I had sworn never to shout again. Shouting meant you had lost control. Shouting meant you were afraid. I was not afraid. "I have a question." The judge frowned. "This is not a forum for questions from the respondent. You may direct your inquiries through your counsel." "I don't have counsel," I said. "I waived representation." He frowned deeper. "Then you may speak only in response to direct." "Your Honor," I interrupted him. The room went still again. "Before we proceed with this hearing, I believe you would like to review a recording I have in my possession." I watched the color leave his face. It was not gradual. It was a drain, a physical retreat of blood from his cheeks, as if someone had pulled a plug at the base of his skull. His lips parted. His hand, which had been resting on the gavel, began to tremble. "What recording?" His voice was thin. The gravel had turned to sand. "An audio recording," I said, "of a conversation between yourself and Mr. Alan Strauss, the complainant's attorney, dated October 14th of last year. The conversation took place at the Riverside Grill in Georgetown. Table 7. You discussed the possibility of manufacturing a complaint against me in exchange for a favorable appointment to the Federal Circuit. Mr. Strauss agreed to find a former subordinate willing to sign an affidavit. You agreed to expedite the hearing. The silence that followed was not hungry anymore. It was sick. It was the silence of a room that had just watched a man fall from a great height and was waiting to hear the sound of the impact. The judge's hand found the gavel. He tapped it once, weakly. This is absurd. This is a fabrication. I will not. I have the recording, Your Honor." I reached into my inner pocket. I did not pull out a device. I pulled out a small envelope, folded in thirds. I placed it on the table next to the Navy Cross. "It has been authenticated. It has been backed up. It has been delivered to the Office of Judicial Conduct, should this hearing proceed." I did not smile. I did not sneer. I did not feel vindicated. I felt the same way I felt that day in the mud, when I reached the extraction point and handed Reyes to the medic. I had done what needed to be done. There was no satisfaction in it. There was only the heavy, ordinary sensation of completion. The judge tried to speak. A sound came out, not a word, a nod of air. He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. He looked at the court reporter, who had stopped typing and was staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes. He looked at the clerk, who was already reaching for a phone the judge called a recess. His voice cracked on the word. He stood. He left the bench. He walked with the gait of a man whose legs had forgotten their purpose. The door behind the bench swung shut, and he was gone. The courtroom exhaled. A collective release of breath that I had not realized everyone had been holding. People turned to look at me, some with wonder, some with fear, some with the greedy curiosity of those who had just witnessed a public execution, but were not sure who the executed party had been. I did not look at them. I looked at the medal. Deanne had not moved. I turned my head slowly and I looked at her. Her smirk had vanished. In its place was something I had never seen on her face before. Not fear, not respect, confusion. A child's bewilderment at a magic trick she had not understood. She had expected me to break. She had expected tears. She had expected rage. She had expected me to scream and plead and beg for my reputation. Instead, I had simply reached into my pocket and handed the judge his own rope. She opened her mouth. I thought she might say something. I thought she might ask me why I had waited, why I had not used the recording earlier, why I had let her sit there, smirking, believing she had won. I did not wait for her question. I looked away. I did not owe her an answer. I did not owe anyone an explanation for the way I moved through the world. Silence was not a weakness. It was a storage unit. I had been storing things for years, and today I had taken one thing out. The clerk announced that the hearing was adjourned indefinitely. I stood. I buttoned my jacket. I picked up the Navy Cross and placed it back in its case. The clasp clicked shut. I put the envelope back in my pocket. The recording would never need to be played. The judge knew that. The threat of it was enough. His career was over, not because I had destroyed him, because he had destroyed himself, and I had merely preserved the evidence. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was long and fluorescent and smelled of floor wax. I walked past the security guards, past the waiting families, past a journalist who tried to ask me a question. I did not answer. I walked through the revolving doors and into the sunlight. The sun was ordinary. The street was ordinary. Cars honked. Pigeons scattered. The world continued as if nothing had happened, and in a way, nothing had happened. The hearing had been a performance. The judge had been a performer. I had been a prop. Now the stage was empty. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat. I did not start the engine. I sat there for a long moment, watching the courthouse steps through the windshield. People streamed in and out. Lawyers with briefcases. Families with folded hands. No one looked at me. My phone buzzed. My wife, I answered. John? Her voice was steady. She had always been steady. She had married me knowing that she would never be first in my life, that the sea would always come before her, that the uniform would always come before her, that a medal I never asked for would always sit in a drawer between us. She had accepted that. She had never complained. It's over, I said. She paused. She knew me. She did not ask for details. Come home, she said. I started the engine. I drove home. The roads were familiar. The traffic was predictable. The radio played a song I did not recognize. I did not turn it off. I let it play. When I walked through the front door, I did not speak. I walked to my study. I opened the drawer. The photograph of Petty Officer Daniel Reyes was still there, face up, cracked at the corners. I placed the Navy Cross next to it. I looked at the two of them together, the medal and the man, the symbol and the flesh, the receipt and the purchase. I closed the drawer. I did not lock it. I did not need to. The fight had cost me something, not my dignity, not my career, something quieter, something I could not name. The certainty that justice was clean. It was not clean. It was a mess of timing and leverage and silence held for too long. I had won, but winning felt like losing. It always had. I walked into the kitchen. My wife was at the stove. She did not turn around. She just stirred the pot and said, "There's bread on the counter." I nodded. I sat down. I ate. The bread was ordinary. The butter was ordinary. The afternoon was ordinary, and I was still here. Still breathing. still carrying Reyes's weight in my shoulders, even though he was 2 states away, standing on a linoleum floor in a hardware store, selling nails to men who had never carried anything heavier than a suitcase. I did not think about the judge. I did not think about Diane. I did not think about the recording or the envelope or the pale, falling look on Thorpe's face when he realized he had been outweighted. I thought about Reyes. I thought about the way his fingers had clamped around my wrist. One squeezes, then release. I had been holding on ever since. To the metal, to the memory, to the silence. It was time to let go, but I didn't know how. So I just sat there in the ordinary afternoon with ordinary bread and ordinary butter, and I waited for the letting go to come on its own. It didn't come. Not that day. Not the next. But I had learned long ago that some weights are not meant to be put down. They are meant to be carried with dignity. And dignity, I had finally understood, was not the absence of weight. It was the refusal to drop it in front of an audience. I finished my bread. I washed my plate. I went back to the study and opened the drawer one more time. I looked at the photograph. I looked at the medal. And I closed the drawer again. The silence, this time, was not empty. It was full. Full of everything I had carried. Full of everything I had refused to say. Full of the strange, unbearable peace of having done exactly what was required and nothing more. Outside, the sun set, the streetlights came on. The world kept spinning. I kept breathing. That was enough.